ESFPs are, in my view, the most underrated type. In the game of chess, pawns are looked upon as the weakest pieces. Yet, through a combination of luck, tactics, and sheer forward momentum, a pawn can make the tenuous journey all the way to the other end of the board, where, if you are familiar with the rules of chess, it can become a queen. ESFPs are the pawns of the MBTI community, often overlooked and underestimated, which I would suggest is a very dangerous thing to do. Having extroverted sensing backed up by introverted feeling is a powerhouse combination where the impactfulness of SE is unbridled from TI, but is instead driven by the individualism of FI. For example, the ESTP, which has TI as their second function, can always be reasoned with. There's always a sensible deal that can be struck or some kind of consensus based on logic that you can come to with them. ESFPs, on the other hand, cannot be reasoned with, at least nowhere near as easily. ESFPs have TI polar, so you can think of it as the function that they struggle with the most. This makes it extremely difficult to convince them of something using logic, especially when that clashes with their individual values. In a sense, introverted thinking is kind of bound by logic, whereas introverted feeling is bound only by desire, which is endless. In the ENTJ video, I quoted Napoleon, who, along with Julius Caesar, are considered to be the poster boys for ENTJs in the MBTI community. However, in other personality typing systems like Socionics, they're both actually typed as ESFPs. ESFPs are often portrayed as party animals, which is not exactly inaccurate, but it's simply because that's an everyday example of one of the ESFP's main traits, which is that the ESFP is comfortable being out of control and confronting the unknown. Whereas the NI DOMs, so the INTJs and the INFJs, or high NI users in general, are always trying to know in advance what's going to happen, whether that's through trying to predict the future or trying to bring some preconceived notion into existence. When you look back at the way both Julius Caesar and Napoleon rose to power and maintained power and conquered places, it doesn't feel like an NTJ approach. You realise the sheer chaos of the situations they were in. Situations where they threw themselves in, acting first, then figuring things out in the moment using tactical intelligence. This version of ESFPs, being conquerors, is a much more flattering and I think accurate portrait of them. There is the capacity for unrestrained force within them once the spark of desire or motivation is triggered. So the slightly reckless, out of control friend that you have in your life, when the shit hits the fan and chaos comes knocking at your door, which it always will, they may just be the exact people you want next to you in the trenches. So Luan, whose channel I'm currently hosting, and whose basement I may or may not be currently locked in, has been typed as an ESTP for a long time. People have often questioned this, suggesting many different types, and recently the idea of her being an ESFP rather than an ESTP has seemed much more likely, and it's an instructive case on how to tell the difference between ESFPs and ESTPs. The central contrast between them, I would say, is between FI and TI. So how do you find out which one someone has? You start an argument about something that's very important to the person, and you see which weapon they bring to the fight. If during the course of this argument they say things like, "That's not me, I don't want that, I don't like that, that doesn't resonate with me, I don't believe in this, that's not how I see myself," that would be more of an introverted feeling style of arguing. If they say, "That doesn't make sense, that doesn't get us towards our goal quickly, you're contradicting yourself," that's more of an introverted thinking way of arguing. So if you are a type that's a high TI user and you're working with a high FI user, then let's start a support group. Also, if you want to skip over a lot of pain, try to psychoanalyze exactly what the person envisions their best self being and factor that aspiration into any plans that you're making. Types that have thinking above feeling can often see their value being in what they can do and what they can achieve, whereas feeling types, or types that have feeling above thinking, see their value as being wrapped up in who they are. That's a very broad, but often very useful distinction. I'll give you another Luan-related insight into sensing types, but specifically types that have the SE-NI axis. things have to be seen to be believed is something of an ESFP and more broadly a sensing mantra. They have an innate distrust towards the tendency of intuitive types to constantly look for hidden meanings and patterns, often where there aren't any. I've observed many situations where an intuitive type has come out with some kind of grand insight or assertion, only to be asked bluntly by an ESFP, "How do you know that?" And, as is often the case, it turns out that many intuitive leaps were made in that insight that is largely unsupported by any kind of observable or concrete data. Having SE as your main function and NI as your inferior function means that you'll be taking in all of these concrete facts and data and letting these NI insights develop organically over time. What they lose in the speed of their insights, they make up for in the depth or rigorousness of them. Instead of the big leaps made by intuitive types that skim over or sometimes downright ignore concrete realities, the ESFP's insights, when they finally arrive, will be so grounded in factual observation that they'll rarely be wrong. So what I'm essentially saying is, I would take the insight of a well-developed and mature ESFP probably more seriously than any intuitive type. Insights and ideas for intuitive types are frivolous to a certain extent. They have so many that they can afford to be wrong. When sensing types, and specifically ESFPs, come to you with a big insight, you just know that it's being said with the weight of evidence behind it. Having extroverted thinking in their third slot gives them an organisational ability when they need it. It's also a function that they enjoy satisfying. Ticking things off a to-do list, getting stuff done, will bring them a lot of joy. The ideal state for an ESFP is that their SE is giving them the impetus to take action. Their FI is providing the value system to select which path to go down. And their extroverted thinking is pushing them down that path in the most effective and efficient way, eventually realizing an introverted intuition goal, which I've noticed when it's an inferior function is often referred to as a sense of fate or destiny.